Yes or no to the children's referendum, and the Romney-Obama battle, which victor would actually be best for Ireland? Good evening and welcome to the Frontline. Later, just hours before Election Day dawns in the United States, we'll be asking, does it really make any difference to Ireland who wins the presidency? But first, the children's referendum. The Referendum Commission has outlined the 4 key areas, which it says are the explicit obligation to protect and vindicate the rights of children. That's number 1. Number 2, state intervention if parents fail in their duty. 3, adoption. And 4, the best interests and the views of the child. Now, you can refer to the booklet which every household received, or you can refer to the Commission's website for further clarification. Now, tonight we have with us the Minister for Children, Frances Fitzgerald, who's sponsoring the constitutional change, and we have newspaper columnist John Waters, who is opposing it. Also in our audience, some committed yes voters, some committed no voters, and some undecideds, and we'll be hearing from some of them in a few minutes. But first, 2 60-second opening statements from our speakers. First, Minister Frances Fitzgerald. We want her to join us at the podium, please. And we have a question, which is, why should people vote yes?
This amendment does a few important things to change the 1937 Constitution. It establishes that children must be listened to when courts are making decisions about their lives. For example, if a child is in care, the judge must hear the child's views and experiences and take them into account. There is no constitutional requirement at present for this. The amendment fixes that. More than that, this amendment says that when judges make decisions about children's lives, those decisions should be in the best interest of the child. Most people would assume that is what the Constitution already says. It doesn't. If this referendum is passed, that simple, just principle will be included in our Constitution. This amendment ensures that all children are treated equally in relation to adoption. This amendment allows us to protect children properly. Since 1937, the Constitution's references to child protection have been about the moral and physical failures of the parents, not the safety and welfare of the child. This amendment fixes that and makes clear our commitment to do everything we can to protect children from sexual and physical abuse and neglect. This amendment does one other vital thing. It establishes a simple principle, a principle from which all the others flow. Our children have rights, and it's our job to protect them.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now I will invite John Waters to come to the podium, and the question for John is, why should people vote no? John.
Please, do not be deceived. This amendment is not about vulnerable children. It is not about the rights of children. I'm a father who would die for his child, like the vast majority of you parents out there. But I believe this amendment will be bad for my child, now as a teenager, and later when she becomes a parent herself. This amendment is about stealing and destroying the rights of all parents. It's about transferring the ultimate right to parent from mothers and fathers to the state. It's about undermining the biological link between parents and children. It's about reducing the natural function of parenthood to a caretaker role, with the state as permanent supervisor and ultimate judge. It's about placing all parents on permanent probation, with the state deciding what is good for children. But the state cannot love. Only you can love your child. Don't be bullied by the moral blackmail and scaremongering of the vested interests. If you want to protect your children and keep the state out of your family, vote no on Saturday. You owe it to your children and your children's children.
Thank you, John. Now, as I mentioned, we have a number of people in our audience who are committed to a no vote, committed to a yes vote, and some undecideds. Let's go to you, Joseph Egan. You're of the Alliance of Parents Against the State. You're voting no. Why?
Pat, there's a number of reasons here. But tonight, coming as a parent, I was kind of afraid to say that I'm going to vote no against children's rights referendum. I mean, it's almost that you're anti-children if you're going to say you're going to vote no.
Okay, so why are you voting no?
Well, the reason I'm going to vote no is I've looked at the legislation, and I've looked and I've consulted with Frances Fitzgerald. In January I met with her, and the fundamental reason that I'm voting no is the legislation is very deceiving. There's no definition of what is in the best interest of the child, and that's very, very concerning. The state is looking for the people of Ireland, the parents of Ireland, to hand over this power that they have, which is they are the number one parent. Now, I asked as a parent, could the child be guaranteed, and I asked the Minister this, could the children of Ireland be guaranteed access, equal access to both parents? And that has been left out, because what the state actually has done is immediately meant that the state is the number one parent, not the parents of Ireland. Now, the Irish people need to really realise this is extremely dangerous. And the other issue that is crucial to this is the adoption. This is something, if a relationship breaks down because of drug addiction or whatever it is, you get treatment. Unfortunately, your children have been taken into care because you've been deemed, there's no definition yet, but you've been deemed as failing your children.
Yeah, but you've got to fail them under this for quite a long time, don't you?
But that's what we would think. But I've talked to thousands of parents across Ireland, and the definition of failing could be to say that your child shouldn't be vaccinated. And if your children have been adopted out, you come back 2 or 3 years later looking for your children back.
The referendum commission say, just a clarification, that this is not about adoption.
Well, Pat, if it's not about adoption, why haven't
sorry,
you brought
I should have said vaccination.
Okay. Well, Pat, this is the problem. The wording is so vague and it's so open to legal interpretation that parents need to be very careful. There's a lot of danger here.
Okay, let's go to a yes voter, Kieran McGuinness, social worker. Why should people vote yes, in your view? What's going to make it better for children?
Yeah, I suppose I'm advocating yes for a lot of the reasons that Minister Fitzgerald outlined there. But if I could just make a point in terms of the adoption argument, because that's consistently coming up. I'm working in the area of adoption, and I honestly feel that if this referendum goes through, that there's a great opportunity for children who are in long-term foster care to be adopted. And a lot of these, there's 2,000 children in long-term foster care in this country. In a lot of those cases, those children don't have contact with their birth family members, and the likelihood, it's not realistic for some of those children to return to their birth family.
What do you think of John's point there about the state becomes the super parent? I mean, is that not the case where you're talking about parents who are no longer involved in the lives of their children? So the state does become the super parent in that case.
I think, like John Waters, stated there in the opening argument, that there is scaremongering I suppose on behalf of the yes advocates, and John, I think you are the one at times who is scaremongering, and if I'm correct, in a recent debate that you referred to, or you used the term forced adoption, which is entirely incorrect, and that's very, very misleading, because there are children in long-term foster care who don't have a relationship with their birth family and most likely will not, and there are safeguards in place such as that proposed 3-year time frame. A lot of people are jumping on that 3-year time frame, thinking that if a child is in care for 3 years, that they're automatically going to be adopted. It's after that 3-year period a child can be considered for adoption. But the most important thing is, I'm working with foster families at the moment, children who are long-term foster care. I'm working with those families for one simple reason: is that those children have expressed their wish to be adopted.
John, you're the one who's scaremongering that this is not about forced taking people from loving parents who want to keep them. Where it will happen is where kids have effectively been abandoned, perhaps by dysfunctional parents, but abandoned, and it gives them a chance.
Well, the thing is, you see, we're going to be bound by the wording. It doesn't really matter what pious aspirations we express now. The Supreme Court of the future will decide the meaning of this wording. And the reference in section 3 here to adoption: provision shall be made by law for the voluntary placement for adoption and the adoption of any child. Okay, so there are two kinds of adoption: voluntary and some other kind. So there is two references here: voluntary placement for adoption and the adoption of any kind. Now, I believe there's a word missing there, but that word is implicit, and that word is forced, compulsory. That means that in future that will be interpreted by the Supreme Court as meaning that there's a capacity, that the courts have a right to order the adoption of any child. Now, the statistics are being grossly misrepresented in relation to adoption and the need for adoption.
But hang on a second, just to bring it back to one other thing that's in the provisions, that the wishes of the child will be taken into account. If the child says, no, I don't want to be be adopted, thank you very much,
But
then it doesn't happen.
How can a 1-year-old child say, I don't want to be adopted? You know, Pat.
Okay. Right, Minister, that there's voluntary adoption where parents feel for one reason or another, one or both of them can't cope, so they voluntarily give up the child for adoption. John is inferring from the wording, therefore, that the opposite to that, but it's also the other kind, is forced adoption.
No, I think let's be clear about a couple of things, Pat. I mean, it's very important when you look at the wording to remember that the strong position of the family and parents in the Irish Constitution remains unchanged, absolutely remains unchanged. Article 41 and 42, not a word is changed. The very best place for the vast majority of children is with their families. Everybody knows that, and that's why would the state want to do anything different to that? That's where children should be, except in exceptional circumstances where their safety or welfare is threatened. That's the point there. In relation to adoption, that provision is simply to allow married or non-married parents, if it's an option, if they're not able to look after their child, that they can voluntarily place the child for adoption.
Why doesn't it
most
stop
people,
after voluntary placement for adoption? Why does it say the adoption of any child?
Because most people watching the programme would say, well, how would that situation ever arise? It's probably very rare indeed, but it's so there isn't any constitutional impediment. At the moment, if a couple are married and they're, for whatever reason, absolutely unable to care for their child, and they decide they would like that child to be adopted, they cannot do it under the Irish Constitution.
But I want to go back to John, because John is making the point that it is possible under this to have a forced adoption. But John, that would suggest that the state is malign.
Well, Pat, I mean...
And I mean, we can't go along with the notion,
Pat,
can
we
live
next door to the United Kingdom, and over there, they already have forced adoption. There's a journalist in the Sunday Telegraph, people can look up his name on the Sunday Telegraph site, Christopher Booker, who writes about this virtually every second week. Horrifying cases of social workers and police officers going into maternity wards in the dead of night and snatching children from the arms of their mothers. This is real, and it's happening in a country very like ours. And where we're going with this wording is into the same territory. This is what we're going for. This is what they want us to have. Because fundamentally, you know, there are all kinds of issues here about adoption. A lot of misleading stuff has been told about adoption. There are a couple of hundred adoptions every year. And, you know, most of them are in families. There are 4,000 children in care at any given moment who are the children of unmarried mothers, right? Who can be adopted. There's no constitutional impediment. Nobody's saying there is. And yet, you only have a couple of hundred adoptions every year.
The test at the moment for adoption, just to say, is abandonment by the parents, whether they're married or not married, and abandonment effectively up to the age of 18. That's why at the moment we have 17-and-a-half-year-olds going into the High Court and saying, I've been with this foster family for 10 years, for 9 years. I want to be fully part of this foster family. Because the test is so high, they have to wait until they're 17-and-a-half to go into the High Court.
The reason
now,
is
can I also say, let's go back to the question of forced. I want to deal with. No, let me finish now. That's not true, John. That's a disservice. That's a disservice,
Minister. How much are they being paid?
John, that is a disservice to foster families out there. You've quoted the amount, but John, that's a disservice to foster parents.
And 353 for a child between 12 and 18. That's the reason, and that's the key, because that money goes at 18 anyway. That's why.
Hang on. Can I clarify this? Can I clarify this?
Can I just
no, I just want to ask John this, because I want to see what he's saying or hear what he's saying. Are you saying that the state, by bringing in this amendment, is trying to save money because if the kids are adopted, they get no money to the foster parents? Or are you saying that foster parents are venal and they keep going as long as they can, getting the money, and at 17 and a half, just when it's about to run out,
I'm just saying the money is there. But one of the things the state wants to achieve with this is to be able to adopt children much earlier on. Because you find the average age of an adoptive child...
But is it about money? Is that what you're saying?
Is it about money? Well, the money is clearly part of it. 325 euros. How many parents with 2 or 3 children couldn't do with 325 euros per child per week?
Minister,
Pat, come on. I want to... I want to deal with this issue of forced adoption because I think it's really important to deal with it. You're making comparisons to the UK. We have a totally different situation here, a different law. We have a constitution a constitution that puts parents at the centre.
So far.
If there was a question of adoption and a child being eligible for adoption, there are so many safeguards. First of all, there's no rush to adoption, and it won't be in, we're not talking about thousands of cases. We're talking about in situations where a child has been abandoned and doesn't have contact with their parent.
Okay.
No, I must say this, you're talking about proper assessment. You have to go to an adoption authority. You have to go to a high court. You have a constitution with parents at the centre. How could you possibly be in a situation where you would have forced adoptions in Ireland? It is absolute scaremongering to say that.
It's happening.
Absolute scaremongering.
Okay,
I know of the children of Irish parents. I know one child of an Irish
and it's
mother
a disservice to adoption.
forcibly adopted in the UK
it's
within
a
the last year.
disservice.
Okay, that is the UK though, John.
As a concept.
We'll talk to some more people.
Going.
Fiona Jennings, regional volunteer organiser for the ISPCC. You are voting yes. Why?
We've been advocating for a yes vote, I suppose, since the date of the referendum was announced. I suppose we work day to day on the ground with vulnerable children. And John, I would actually love if you had the conversation with the young person that I had last Saturday. She's 16 years of age and she completely gets why this amendment is absolutely necessary. She's been through a family crisis situation where intervention was not there from an early stage. She is now one of those children in long-term foster care who wants to be adopted. And I just wish you had the opportunity to talk to her and to hear her story from her point of view. I feel far too often in the debates and in the media that's been out there in the coverage in relation to this, the child's voice is completely absent from all angles, and I think it's so important.
Okay, here another voice now. Damon Wise, National Council for People with Disabilities. Now, you and your wife and your children are on the autistic spectrum, is that so?
We're all in the autistic spectrum. We have been in the situation because the children have disturbed sleep that we were looking for assistance so we could have the odd night
you were looking for respite?
Respite care.
Yeah.
The situation is that because of the system, if the children have occasional care, that they get paid an hourly, the foster parents get paid an hourly rate. The system is set up to try to have a standardised €325 a week, irrespective of the time spent.
Okay,
now,
but hang on a second. There's no way the state wants to pay this money out. If you are capable of looking after your children will be returned to you immediately that you're capable of doing so, once your respite is over. And I mean, they didn't take your children away from you, did they?
They tried. We had to go...
But you have your children, isn't that so? The system did not fail you at the end of the day.
We had to fight, make an official complaint against the HSE to guarantee and to prove the facts that what they were alleging never happened, and to make sure that we maintained our rights as parents.
But the system, in the end of the day, vindicated your rights, isn't that so?
Officially it did, but they still tried to fight against it.
All right, another voice, Marion Quinn of the Childhood Development Initiative, St Mark's Youth and Family Centre in Tala. You are a yes voter, is that so?
I certainly am, Pat, and I'm really saddened and shocked at the tone of some of the things. John, I think it's complete scaremongering. I think you're completely working off people's fear, and I think there are certainly some inaccuracies there. Most of the debate, most of the focus around the referendum is at the high end of the threshold. So children in the care of the state, children who are in need of protection. The work I'm involved in is at the other end of the spectrum. It's early prevention and intervening at a very early point. So some of the implications of the referendum are not immediately apparent in the kind of area I'm working in, which is the area most of our children are in. Most of our children don't need social work services, will never ever come anywhere close to being in the care of the HSE. And the reason I'm voting yes is because I want our country to make a statement that we care about children, that we value them, and that we believe that they should have a voice.
But I mean, part of the job that you would do, if necessary, would be early intervention, wouldn't it? If you found a child in the company of utterly dysfunctional parents, perhaps addiction issues, perhaps violence issues, violence against the child or against each other.
Yes, and there are lots of systems and assessment processes and supports to put in place that enable families to engage and look after their child before you ever get to the point that people are talking about here.
Okay, and we have a no voter. Yes, Dr. O'Brien?
Well, I've got
Bridget, yes,
there are
Bridget.
3 children in a family that are 3 years or more in care, in foster care. The question is, those 3 little boys, will they be kept together? What guarantees are there? What guarantees are there that they won't be even put into different countries, in different locations altogether? And there is no
Are those 3 little boys in Ireland?
Yes.
In care in Ireland?
In care. They're in care with their aunt. But in more recent weeks, I've noticed that they've had their hearing checked. They've been checked out in a way that would suggest that perhaps they may be...
No, but given that there is such a demand for children to be adopted in Ireland, no matter where in the world they come from, it's highly unlikely that any adoption society in Ireland is going to be exporting those children as they once did in the 50s to America.
I'm not saying it's likely today.
But possible in the future.
The position is there. It's the law of unintended consequences, Pat.
Okay, Minister, do you want to respond to that?
Well,
like, if you have 3 little boys, would they be kept together, or is there any guarantee that they would be kept together?
That is, I mean, that's actually a practice issue that you could ask today. If young children are in care and if siblings are in care, should they be kept together? Of course, that would be best practice. And you say those little boys are together, and nothing changes. Those children, that's the same situation as currently. I mean, yes, but you don't build in details about practices into a constitution. I mean, but because I mean, that's about best
gentleman up
practice
there,
and
by the
doing
way,
the
who
right
obviously
thing by
shares a
those
view
little
with
boys.
Dr.
The voice
O'Brien.
of a child is a practice.
mean, at the moment, it would be good practice, I presume, to keep siblings together. Now, that practice will not be affected, good, bad or indifferent, will it, by the referendum?
Yeah, everything will be changed by the referendum. But it's open to interpretation by judges and by courts in the future, and it's also held in camera.
Okay,
it's held in camera. It's held in secret.
Minister, I have to let the Minister reply to this. Minister, yes.
Let's go back to what the referendum is actually about. It's about saying that children have rights themselves. And we saw, and I want to say this, we saw 20 years ago, and we saw in the Kilkenny case, just a couple of years ago in the Roscommon case, we saw that abuse went on and on and on. And people ask, why didn't people act more quickly? Why were children allowed to be abused and raped?
Because the state cannot care for children, and it does not care for children.
Not at all. Why didn't people intervene to act, John? You have to ask that question.
There was no constitutional impediment in those cases. None.
We want to just
hang on,
guys.
Just a second.
Audience, please. We want to actually have a coherent, intelligible debate for our viewers at home, and if everyone's barracking, we won't be able to do that. I want to hear this little point debated between the 2 panellists first, then I will return to our audience. Yes.
So what Catherine McGuinness said then, she said, there isn't enough focus on the child. Let's go back to this amendment. What it says is, let's put a focus on the child. Let's, in exceptional cases where children are at risk, where the child has been damaged, where their safety and welfare is at risk, there's an obligation on a state for the common good, for the good of the child, to intervene in a proportionate way. And I want to take up the point that was made here by the lady in the front of the audience, where she said this is about a proportionate response. So the very first thing you would do when families come to the attention of state services, the very first thing you do is you keep the child at home, of course. You give supports to the family. It's counselling, it's parenting courses. You go to family resource centres. That's happening all over this country, and families are being supported.
What the Minister is saying is that if there are failures, they would be system failures, nothing to do with the referendum. Even Roscommon, other cases we've all heard about, systems failures, maybe individual failures. But
all those cases that are talked about are systems failures. They're nothing to do with the Constitution.
It's a lack of focus on the child, John.
There's a
lack of focus on the child.
By the state. By the state, which now wants more power for its lack of focus.
It's not more power, it's more obligations, John.
Now, let's be clear, Pat.
It's more obligations.
It's very important to shift this, because, you see, they keep talking about these terrible cases, but in fact, the vast majority of children who are taken into care are not taken into care because of abuse, physical or sexual, or neglect. They're taken into for reasons to do with the health, mental health of parents. Yes, in 2004, Pat, 22% of the children taken into care that year were taken in to do with physical and sexual abuse and neglect. 23% were taken in to do with issues to do with housing and finance. finance. Now, let's think about that in this present day.
That's
in the
not
old days,
correct.
you had the NSPCC, the forerunner to the lady in the front's organisation, had the cruelty man going into people's houses, taking their children. Now this government is imposing draconian policies on the people of this country. And you will have the austerity man. The austerity man will go into your house and say, there's not enough food in your fridge. You don't have enough money to keep your children. We're taking them into care. This is what the austerity man is, the future of this society.
John,
and we will create a nightmare very similar
Okay.
to what happened here in the 50s and 60s with institutional care for children.
John, can I ask you? I mean, you're saying that this is possible under the amendment were it to be passed. But why would the state want to do what you're suggesting?
Well, you see, because in my experience, and anybody who actually has to, I deal with a lot of these cases, Pat, I get a lot of people talking to me. And there's an extraordinary phenomenon with social workers, whereby they seem to have been de-empathised by their experience, by their training or whatever. So they don't seem to have any capacity to actually empathise with the people they're dealing with. It seems to me that they have almost an automaton personality at play, which causes them to really kind of pursue ideologically the objective, the ultimate objective of their...
Well, John, I have to say, I think you're the
ministry.
ideological one. I'm talking about 1,600 children last year who came into care, and 85% of the children who came into care where it was non-voluntary. Why did they come in? They came in because of abuse, neglect, and very serious family issues.
There's an ad here in last week's Southside which talks about physical or mental health problems. This is why children come into care. Physical or mental health problems, alcohol, substance abuse, difficulties related to unemployment, poor housing, lack of family support, and or separation from country or region. Nothing to do with neglect, nothing to do with abuse. This is the reality of this amendment.
Can we move on?
Pat, I have to come back, Pat, just to say that is incorrect. Why do children come into care? I absolutely know that last year 2,218 children came into care. The reasons they came into care, 85% of those admissions of the non-voluntary, that's where parents didn't ask. You do have about a third where parents ask for support and come along and ask for that respite. But 85% were because the children were being abused, neglected, and serious family problems.
What is neglect?
Serious neglect where the child is suffering.
I want to move on. Hang on. I want to move on because we have a couple of solicitors with us. Deirdre O'Halloran, a member of Fianna Fáil, as it happens. That's nothing to do with anything. A solicitor working as a mediator and counsellor with an interest in family law. What's your worry about this?
First of all, Pat, I don't work as a solicitor anymore. I work in mediation now. My main concern is my experience in the district court, and how the expert was seen as the person who could judge what was going to go on here. And those experts were social workers, the very people who ignored and didn't take up their position that they have under the Constitution to vindicate the rights of the child. They didn't take up those positions when they had to in the Roscommon case, the Kilkenny case, the Baby Ann case, and also, Pat, in relation to the Ryan report.
Okay, now you are advocating a no vote, isn't that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And with John all the way.
Can I ask you this?
Not scaremongering.
I want to ask you this. If the people that were supposed to vindicate the rights of the child professionally were not doing it by your lights as you observe them, what is to suggest then that they will all suddenly start doing it if this amendment is passed? Because if they're not doing it then, they're certainly not going to do it.
Society, Pat, doesn't see this. The only time that that people got some protection in the industrial schools was when the victims themselves spoke up, and when some journalists came along and supported them to speak up. Their voice was heard, and then there was some support for them. The experts
so you are actually concerned about the quality of the care, be it foster care or state care in an institution. That's your big concern. You don't trust the state, is that it?
I don't at all, Pat. And what John is saying is completely correct.
Okay.
What John is saying, if you look at the Ryan report, 170,000 children were taken, aided and abetted by the ISPCC. They were taken out of their homes. Why were they taken out of their homes? They were taken out of their homes because they were poor.
All right. Deirdre Burke, also family law solicitor and mediator. You take a very different view. You're a yes vote.
I'm an absolute yes voter, Pat, and I won't be changing my mind based on anything I have heard here tonight. I'm quite shocked at the level of fear that has been raised among people by what has been suggested by Mr. Waters and by some of the no voters. I think, and it's very sad that what is actually happening is that this debate is turning into a family versus state argument, and yet again, yet again, if I could finish my point, yet again, the children are being lost in the middle. But the point that I want to make tonight is that I want people to consider broadening the debate beyond the issues of child protection and adoption, which are quite clearly very key issues, and I'm not diminishing the importance of those in any way. But my main area is private family law. So I've worked as a solicitor in the courts for almost 20 years, dealing with separations, divorces, access and custody applications, where children are involved in the middle of disputes centred around marital and relationship breakdown. Every day there are decisions in the courts of this country being made. For example, who a child will live with and what contact they will have with the other parent. At the moment, there is no legal obligation on the courts to consider the opinion or the wishes of the child in that situation.
Okay. And you say, as we know from the amendment, if it happens that they have to take the views of the child in consideration where it's appropriate, in other words, age appropriate. John made the point, a 1-year-old can't give a view. So you believe that would be an important addition?
I think, Pat, it is more than important. It is absolutely vital that we get the voice and opinion of children into family law situations. If you take the statistics for 2011, there were just shy of 15,000 applications in the private family law area to do with children. If there's an average of 1 child in each of those families, that's 15,000 children whose voices are not being represented in the courts.
So, John, given that you're the one criticised for this, this would appear on the face of it to be a good thing, that a child would have to be listened to. Absolutely, by law, would have to be listened to.
The provision is already there in law, in the Children's Act and in the Guardianship of Infants Act. And it's actually being flouted by most of the courts, because the state will not listen to the child unless the state knows what the child and the state agrees with what the child will say.
That is precisely the reason why it's important to put it in the Constitution.
The most dangerous place a child can be in this country is in the care of the state.
No, it's... Sorry.
196 children in 10 years died. That's 18 children. That's a child every 18 days. Since this campaign started, 2 children statistically have died in the care of the state.
I want to stop you for a moment. Because when we talk on radio frequently about abuse, there are people who ring us in and say, you know, it's not the priests, it's not the brothers, it's not the nuns. The most dangerous place for a person, for a child, in terms of use, is in the family home.
Yes, it is true.
Pat,
that's what they keep telling us.
Pat? In your family?
Not in some families. In some families.
What are you talking about, Pat? This is nonsense. It's a tiny minority, and this is actually dealt with under Article 42.5. It allows for intervention in the case of moral or physical failure. It's very clear. John. The only reason intervention hasn't occurred in Roscommon in these cases is because of the incompetence of the social workers.
I want to go back to the Minister. Minister, a valid point, a very important point being made. OK, so the child has to be listened to. But someone at some level makes the decision what is the best interests of the child. Whether it's a judge or somebody along a social worker. I mean, that is the concern that many people in the audience have, is that the people may make a mistake.
OK, if I could come in, Pat, a couple of points. First of all, to say there have been shocking failures in the past by the state. Absolutely shocking failures. That is all the more reason to now have a strong obligation on the state to protect children and to be careful about their interventions and to listen to the views of the child and make sure that the court procedures. Do you think that any of those children who were sent to letterfrack, do you think anybody ever listened to them? They certainly didn't. Now they have to listen to them, consider their very best interests.
Who put them in letterfrack?
Another point.
The state put them in letterfrack.
Okay, I want to continue. We talk about physical and moral, which was in the provision that John refers to. We're taking that out and putting the focus. Physical and moral was used as a reason for parents who were poor, for parents who perhaps weren't married. That's why the children went into care. We're now saying if you take children into the care of the state, you do it because the safety and welfare of the child is being seriously affected. That's a much better way of looking at child protection.
Somebody should tell the fostering agencies.
Child-centred. And thirdly, be very careful when we're talking about state care. We're talking about 5,500 children who are living with foster parents in family homes. Do not stereotype those children and their experiences in state care. The state has to get better at what it does. Look at the history. That's why we're putting these provisions in the Constitution, to put a greater obligation, to put a greater... obligation on the state.
John has outlined his concerns about so-called forced adoption. The Minister has offered you the situation where there are many children who would love to be adopted, who have been abandoned by their parents, because not all parents are good parents or capable parents or even compos mentis parents. Yes. This amendment, in theory, would give the right to those kids to be
only in theory
adopted.
Because if you look closely at the figures, you see that, for example, there are 4,000 children in care at any given time who are the children of unmarried mothers. There is no constitutional impediment. Yet there are only... There's not for unmarried mothers.
Yes, there is.
There isn't. There is absolutely not.
The child has to... The child has to be abandoned and not
about the married family only,
and abandoned up to the age of 18, and that's the reality. And that's why those
150,
children...
160 adoptions
But anyway,
per
adoption
year.
is really only one of the minor issues that this amendment deals with. The main provision is relation to protection.
I'm conscious of balance here. Susan, you're a yes voter.
A reluctant yes voter. I'm co-founder of an advocacy and advice group for adopted people in Ireland, of which there are about 50,000. We will get calls, helpline inquiries from adopted people who've been deprived of knowledge of their origins, their families, their cultural backgrounds. And what I am concerned about with this referendum, I feel it's come in too early. The Minister, I feel, should have introduced information and tracing rights for Ireland's 50,000 adopted people before taking this step. The referendum, I feel, merely adds to that community, it's a sizable community of adopted people who are lacking that basic information in contravention with the UN Convention on Human Rights as well.
Okay, put that to the Minister. Minister, this is the cart before the horse, that the rights of adopted people, we're talking about the rights of children, but adopted people, be they children or adults, they have certain rights, as Susan would suggest, of traceability, know who they are, know something about their medical condition, know lots of things that these days are important.
Yes.
So you have put the cart before the horse.
No, I haven't. I mean, I'm focusing on children here, and we're looking at how children will be protected, how their rights will be protected, and we're talking about eligibility for adoption. I fully intend to bring in adoption and tracing legislation, and I will be doing that, and I have spoken to Susan about that. But obviously in Ireland there are constitutional issues in relation to access to some of that information because of the Constitution.
So will you have to go back to the people again?
No, but can I say that I absolutely want to bring in the strongest possible tracing legislation, and I'm committed to doing that, and I will do that.
I'm going to have to wrap up this. I'm going to have to wrap up this debate. Last comments from you, John.
There's very good reason to be afraid of this amendment. Would you ask the state to raise your child? If not, why would you ask the state to raise anybody else's child? I wouldn't give my pet cat to the state to run. The state cannot love. Above all, even if you don't, I'm not even asking you to vote no. What I'm asking in the first instance, read the Constitution, read the amendment, understand, do not sell our constitutional protections down the river.
I have to say, Pat, and I want to reassure parents, I'm a parent. Why would the state want to be taking children away from their parents? This is about being very clear that the state has an obligation to protect children in exceptional cases where they are at risk of serious abuse and neglect, and it's very clear about that. The state has failed children in the past. Let's do better. Let's support this referendum so we can do better in the future and have a greater obligation on the
Minister, John,
state.
thank you very much for joining us for that very interesting debate. And